Hello, Alessandrina here, and today I wanted to talk about food and emotional eating. And the reason why I'm making this video is oftentimes when I talk to people, there's an aspect of their eating habits that they're dissatisfied with, and that has to do with overeating or eating food in a way that is not necessarily as conscious as they would prefer it to be. So, in the process of either healing from an eating disorder or simply resolving tendencies to eat emotionally, the first step that will be most helpful to the resolution of the emotional eating or the eating disorder is to no longer judge it. If you have a judgment of your process of eating, and of the eating patterns that you've inherited through your conditioning or as a result of pain that you've experienced in the past and having used food as a coping mechanism, for instance, for distracting away from pain, for instance, avoiding feeling our pain. While judging yourself for that would not help you to actually understand the pattern and therefore to resolve it. So the first step to resolving the pattern of emotional eating or an eating disorder is to no longer judge yourself. And if you stop judging yourself, then you can be more consciously aware when you're eating as to what is motivating the eating. Are you eating for nutrition and for sustenance and energy, or are you eating because you feel bored, or you feel sad, or you feel depressed, or you feel afraid or out of control and using food as a coping mechanism? So once you stop judging, then you can look at it and then you can start to make a new choice. If you resolve the non-aligned motivations for eating, that are leading you, for instance, to overeat or to eat certain foods that are not necessarily as nutritional or optimal as the foods you could be eating that support your energy and your vitality and good health. Well, if you don't judge that, if you really allow yourself to be in a state of peace, and consciously assessing why you're eating, and then choosing for yourself to eat for vitality, for energy, for support. And to also, again, be accepting and loving and forgiving of the parts that are motivated by other reasons so that you can resolve them. And as you continue to resolve any fears in your system, any anxiety, any worry, any stress, then in the same fashion that releasing the judgment will help you to uncover why you're eating, if you're also understanding what are your motivations and you're releasing the fearful motivations, then those will release, they will get resolved. And therefore, when comes the time to eat, because you're more grounded and you feel safe and secure and supported, then they won't be the, let's say, the impetus, the instinct, and the reactive energy of just eating and not even thinking about what you're eating and how you're eating it. So that can be very helpful. In addition to that, when you're eating, you can create an environment, an ideal environment that is very peaceful, where the energy is loving. You can light a candle. You can simply kind of like remove distractions. Like, so if you've been eating in front of television, not to say that there's not times where you can not do that, it's just that allowing yourself to be in an environment that is conducive to being conscious, at least in the beginning, so that you're connected to your food. If you're watching something or listening to something or having a conversation, not to say again that you can't have a wonderful conversation with someone while you're eating, simply that transitional phase, it can be very helpful to be much more focused and connected to the food, so that you start to eat from your physiological needs, rather than eat from emotional needs and energies that are essentially ungrounded in your system. So when you create that environment and you experiment and explore your relationship to food, and learning to change your relationship to food, if you have, for instance, an uncomfortable or painful relationship to food because of an eating disorder, or because of being afraid of gaining weight, or any other projected fear onto the process of eating, it can be uncomfortable to just sit and connect to your food. That said, that is the only way to really transcend this dynamic, meaning that you can't learn to love eating and feel good about eating if you have all those different fearful projections going on while you're eating. Am I going to get fat? Am I going to get sick? Am I not going to look the way I want to look? Is this bad for me? Etc., etc. So those things don't help us to be peaceful and connected to the food, and therefore to learn to know what our body really is going to most optimally integrate and be able to absorb and process. If we're in a state of resistance and rejection and fear and aversion, we can't really connect to the food in those ways, and then have the food be most optimally digested and optimally supportive of whatever intention we have with the food that we're ingesting. So that's another aspect that is really important to develop, to cultivate a loving relationship with your food. And in addition, and that's really important, is to relax when you're eating, to allow yourself to relax, which is why the distractions don't help. If you're watching something, listening to something, doing something else, reading a paper, or anything else that people tend to do when they're eating, that's not going to allow you to relax deeply, to be connected in the present moment to what you're doing, to be conscious. So in tantric traditions, and tantra is not just limited to sexuality, tantra is actually all forms of life experiences that we then apply consciousness to and presence to. So in tantric traditions, it's really emphasized to learn to cultivate that loving and present and grounded relationship with food, so that you can really enjoy food. And by the way, when we're connected to our food and to the foods that we're eating, we tend to eat a lot less, because we tend to feel and taste a lot more, and therefore we're more in touch with just feeling satiated with through our sensory experience, and also feeling just also able to identify when we're full, when we've had enough food. And then we get past that, and that becomes uncomfortable to the body, and the body doesn't process the food as well. So we learn, when we're connected to our food and to what we're doing, to consciously eating, we can sense, oh, I've eaten enough, and we can just fill our stomachs in a way that is optimal for our stomachs and the other digestive organs, and feel good. So we have energy instead of draining our energy. We feel good, and we've had a positive sensory experience, which is beneficial too. And in addition to that, and that will be my last recommendation, that when you're eating because you love yourself. To realize that the eating is a process of loving yourself, to remind yourself of that. Every time you eat, you're loving yourself. And that the conscious eating is a reflection of that self-love, of you wanting to support your life and having optimal life force for the things that are meaningful to you, for what you want to achieve, and for living your life in a vital and energized way, in an optimal way. and then realizing, making that shift. So most people on the planet are eating out of not loving themselves, out of maybe hating themselves, meaning that emotional eating is often a process of stuffing our emotions and kind of pushing down on how we feel with the food. And so it's not a loving process. It's not a process that is going to be, in terms of alchemy, it's not going to allow for the processing of the foods in a more optimal way. And when we are loving ourselves, when we're shifting from eating because we hate ourselves through emotional eating to eating because we love ourselves, that's a big shift. And that big shift is going to really kind of resonate and expand into other areas of your life, because when you eat in this way, you will feel more love towards yourself, and you will make more choices that reflect this love towards yourself. And it just, in the same way that a vicious cycle continues to feed that cycle and bring about more negative implications and influences, the same is true of a virtuous cycle. And so when you're loving yourself, when you're consciously eating, you're building a virtuous cycle of loving yourself more in other areas of your life. And so that embodiment of self-love while you're eating is going to echo and start to permeate in other areas of your life and aspects of yourself. So I hope this is helpful. This is kind of a generic model to help people who have either an eating disorder or are noticing that they are eating emotionally or not as consciously as they'd like to. And by applying these steps, you can start to feel better, to eat in a more conscious way, and for that to have many, many beneficial implications in your life and in yourself and in your relationships. I hope this is helpful. Sending you much love.